My name is Kale Morrow. I was the last human ambassador to the Galactic Concord, and I was standing in the center of the largest courtroom ever built when 312 species decided that humanity had no right to exist among the stars. The chamber on Axionis Prime was beautiful, I will give them that. A dome of living light at the heart of the galaxy, shaped by architects who had been folding space before Earth's sun even finished forming. Every species had a seat. Every voice was amplified, so that even the Drenkai, who spoke in frequencies below hearing, could be understood. It was a monument to cooperation, to civilization, to the idea that the galaxy was big enough for everyone. Everyone except us, apparently. I stood at the center, alone, wearing the black and silver of the human confederacy, while the Speaker of the Assembly read the charges against my entire species. Unlicensed development of space-time-altering technology. Expansion rates exceeding Concord protocols by 4,700%. Unauthorized research into extragalactic space. And my personal favorite, cultural influence deemed corrosive to Concord stability. That last one always made me laugh. Corrosive, as if teaching other species to question their governments and season their food was some kind of infection. The vote took 11 minutes, 297 in favor of banishment, 11 against, 4 abstentions, 40,000 years of galactic civilization, and they decided our fate faster than it takes to eat lunch. They gave us 90 days to leave. Every colony, every station, every outpost, every embassy. 90 days to erase 2 centuries of human presence from a galaxy we had helped build. And if any human remained after the deadline, they would be treated as a hostile trespasser. They did not elaborate on what that meant. They did not need to. I was allowed a final statement. I had prepared a long one, full of facts and figures and appeals to reason. I threw it away. I looked out at that enormous chamber, at all those alien faces watching me with relief and pity and quiet satisfaction, and I said 6 sentences. You are making a mistake, not because we will come back for revenge. We will not. But because you have no idea what is already out there in the dark between galaxies. We were the only ones willing to look. And now you are on your own. Nobody listened. Nobody ever does. Until it is too late. I returned to Earth on a fast courier ship, and by the time I arrived, the news had already spread across all 1,400 human colony worlds. The reaction was exactly what you would expect. Rage, disbelief, calls for war from every admiral and general with a pulse. I understood the anger. I felt it myself, not at being expelled, but at the pity I had seen in the eyes of the few species who voted in our favor. They looked at us the way you look at a sick animal. I could have forgiven hatred. Pity was harder to swallow. The United Human Confederacy convened an emergency session within 48 hours. The military leaders wanted to fight. The diplomats wanted to negotiate. The scientists wanted more time to make their case. Everyone had a plan, and every plan was some version of begging or threatening, which are really just 2 sides of the same coin. Then Dr. Lena Vasic walked to the podium, and everything changed. Lena was the architect of the threshold gates, the technology that had scared the Concord badly enough to banish us in the first place. She was 73 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and had the calm, patient manner of someone who had spent her entire life thinking about problems too large for most people to even comprehend. She asked the Confederacy a single question. Why are we begging to stay in a house we have already outgrown? The room went quiet. Lena explained what she had in mind. The threshold gates were not just doorways between points in the Milky Way. They were bridges across the fabric of space-time itself, capable of reaching between galaxies, between the vast, dark spaces that no species in recorded history had ever crossed. For decades, quietly and without permission, humanity had been sending probes through those bridges. We had found something on the other side, a cluster of dwarf galaxies, 200,000 light-years beyond the Milky Way's edge, rich with habitable worlds and untapped resources. We had already begun building infrastructure there, seed colonies, power stations, the skeleton of a new civilization, waiting for its people. Lena's proposal was simple. We would not fight. We would not negotiate. We would not beg. We would leave. Not just Concord space. Not just the Milky Way. We would step outside the galaxy entirely, go somewhere the Concord could not follow, and then we would close the threshold gates behind us. The vote passed unanimously. For the first time in human history, every government, every faction, every colony world agreed on a single course of action. We were leaving, and we were taking everything with us. The next 90 days were the most extraordinary period in human history. 38 billion people across 1,400 worlds, packing up their lives and walking through 7 rings of exotic matter into the unknown. I coordinated the military withdrawal, while civilian transports lined up at the gates, in queues that stretched across entire solar systems. Families carried what they could. Libraries uploaded their archives, museums crated their treasures, farmers harvested their last crops and loaded the seeds for the next planting on the other side. Not every alien species watched us go with satisfaction. The Velith, an insectoid people who had voted against our banishment, quietly provided 200 additional transport ships. They asked for nothing in return. The Drenkai, ancient scholars whose civilization was old when the Concord was young, sent us a gift on the last day. A complete copy of their 40,000-year historical archive. Everything they had ever learned, freely given, because they believed knowledge should never be punished. I have never forgotten that kindness. I never will. There was trouble, of course. A coalition of Concord hardliners called the Ritham Dominion tried to seize Gate 7 before the last evacuees could pass through. They wanted the threshold technology for themselves. Our Marines held the line for 9 hours, while the final transports went through. We lost 14 people that day. I memorized every name. I still say them before I sleep. On the 90th day, I boarded the last ship, a cruiser called the Defiance. I stood at the rear viewport and watched the Milky Way. My home galaxy, the place where humanity had been born, had taken its first steps, had reached for the stars, and been told it reached too far. It was beautiful. It was always beautiful. From the other side, Lena activated the gate collapse protocol. The 7 threshold gates, each one a ring of engineered matter 3 kilometers across, burning with energy that bent light around it like water, began to fold inward. The process was irreversible. There would be no going back, no second chances. The bridges between the Milky Way and wherever we were going were being erased from the structure of space-time itself. A transmission came through from the Rithoan Dominion, demanding, threatening. I did not respond. A second transmission arrived on a private channel. The Velith ambassador, 2 words, travel well. I sent back 2 of my own. Watch the dark. The gates closed. The light went out, and humanity was gone from the Milky Way, as if we had never existed. That was 300 years ago. I am old now. I am writing this from a world called New Dawn, the capital of the human expanse. The sky above me has no familiar constellations. The Milky Way is a faint smear of light near the horizon, beautiful and distant and impossibly small. It is hard to believe that everything we were once fit inside that little spiral of stars. Without the Concord's restrictions, without their protocols and growth limits and endless committees, human science did not just advance, it exploded. We developed communication systems that work across intergalactic distances. We built energy collectors around entire stars. We created ecosystems from bare rock and empty vacuum. We adapted ourselves, carefully and willingly, to survive on worlds that would have been death sentences for any Concord species. The human expanse now spans 40,000 colonized worlds. Our population has passed 300 billion, and we are still growing, still exploring, still reaching for whatever comes next. But the most important discoveries were not about what we built, they were about what we found. The spaces between galaxies are not empty. I need you to understand that. The intergalactic void, that vast darkness that every Concord species was too frightened to enter, is full of things so old and so enormous that the entire Milky Way is a footnote in their story. We found structures out there, megastructures built by a civilization so ancient that it existed before the Milky Way even formed. We called them the Silence Architects. Their works were not ruins, they were barriers, walls built across the void, stretching for millions of light years, designed to contain something. We found their records, we learned what they were keeping out, and then, 112 years after we left the Milky Way, the Concord came knocking. The transmission should have been impossible. The gates were closed, but the signal was raw, desperate, brute-forced across intergalactic space, using every transmitter in the Milky Way firing in unison. It was a scream loud enough to cross 200,000 light-years of empty void. When we decoded it, the message was simple and terrifying. Something had entered the Milky Way from the far side, from the direction the Silence Architect's barriers faced. Something the Concorde's combined military could not slow down, could not reason with, could not understand. It was not an army. It was not a creature. It was a process. A self-replicating wave that consumed stars and converted matter into more of itself. It had already swallowed 11 star systems. The Concorde, with all its ancient wisdom and 40,000 years of civilization, had no idea how to stop it. They were begging us to come back. I sat with that message for a long time. I thought about the trial, the vote, the 297 species who looked at humanity and saw a problem to be removed. I thought about the pity in their eyes. I thought about my 14 Marines who never made it through Gate 7. Then I thought about the Velith ambassador and her 2 quiet words. I thought about the Drenkai and their gift of knowledge. I thought about every human child born in the expanse who had never seen the Milky Way but might one day want to. And I thought about what Lena told me once, years ago, when I asked her why she was never angry at the Concorde. You cannot be angry at people for being afraid, Kale. You can only be ready for when they need you. I authorized the construction of new threshold gates. Bigger, stronger, capable of moving entire fleets in a single transit. 3,000 capital ships, 40,000 escorts. Technologies the Concorde had never seen and could not have imagined. When our gates opened inside Concorde space, the silence on their communication channels told me everything I needed to know. They had expected us to be diminished, broken, bitter refugees limping back from the dark. Instead, they saw a civilization that had outgrown the galaxy itself, returning with power that made their combined fleets look like children's toys. We did not come back for revenge. We came back because the thing consuming their stars was one of the entities the Silence Architects had spent eons containing, and we were the only ones who understood how to stop it. Not with weapons, not with force, with knowledge, with the tools the architects left behind, tools we had spent a century studying while the Concorde sat comfortable and afraid inside their little galaxy. It took 4 months. We built a network of stabilization anchors across the threatened sector, devices that locked space-time so firmly that the consuming wave could not propagate through it. The same solution the architects had used 1 billion years ago, rebuilt by human hands. When it was over, the Concorde offered to reinstate us, full membership, apologies, reparations, everything they had taken away, given back with interest. I declined. I told them, calmly, without anger, that humanity had moved past the need for Concorde membership. The expanse was our home now. But I offered them something better, a door, a single permanent threshold between the Milky Way and the human expanse, kept open for trade, for knowledge, for mutual defense. A door that either side could close but neither side owned. You banished us because you were afraid of what we would become, I said, and you were right to be afraid. We became something you could not imagine, but we also became something better than what we were, and that only happened because you made us walk into the dark alone. So here is the deal. The door stays open. You are welcome to visit. We are happy to help, but we are never coming back inside to stay. The galaxy was a cradle, and we have outgrown it. I am finishing this account on my balcony on New Dawn, looking up at a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. The Milky Way glows faintly on the horizon, small and pale and far away. Somewhere inside it, 312 species are learning to live with the knowledge that the universe is bigger and stranger and more dangerous than they ever wanted to believe. And somewhere out here, in the dark they were too afraid to enter, humanity is still reaching, still building, still asking the questions nobody else will ask. They thought banishment was a punishment. They thought the dark between galaxies was empty. They thought we would wither or crawl back or fade away. They were wrong about all of it. My name is Kale Morrow. I was the last human to leave the galaxy. I was not the last to return. But I will be the last to ever kneel,